Hey everyone, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on your time zones. Welcome to another edition of Trailhead Live. My name is Mohit. I'm a developer evangelist here at Salesforce. I welcome you all to this new series that we are starting. The series is Modern App Development on Salesforce, where we will cover the full spectrum of building applications on Salesforce, including design, build, test, and debug. And this is not only on Salesforce platform, we will also bring Heroku content where we will see how we can sort of use Heroku in our application architecture. So that's why I have Julian. Julian, let's complete some housekeeping slides and then I'll let you introduce to our developer audience here.
Perfect.
So before I begin, there's a forward-looking statement here. Please do not make any purchasing decisions based on anything forward-looking that we make in this presentation. Now, Julian, over to you.
Okay, hello, you all. My name is Julian Duque. I'm a lead developer advocate here at Salesforce, working mainly on the Heroku team. If you don't know me, I have been doing some live sessions as well here at Trailhead Live, focusing mainly on JavaScript and Node.js. Been working with Node since 2011. I'm looking forward to bring all my JavaScript and Node.js expertise with the full Salesforce community. And pretty much this is why I'm joining Mohit on this wonderful Trailhead Live series. So you all learn how to build modern app applications leveraging the full Salesforce platform, both Salesforce and Heroku.
Awesome, Julian. I cannot wait to explore Node.js and how to build Node.js web app, and other microservices, and cannot, sort of wait to hear from you around, different techniques that we have for Heroku. So really excited that you are with us, and thank you so much for being with us. Now
No,
I'll go
thank you for
ahead.
the invitation.
Yeah, no worries. Hey everyone, so my name is Mohit. I've been with the Salesforce ecosystem for a decade now, just focusing on building applications using Salesforce technology. I've been working, as a developer, as an architect on Salesforce platform, and have multiple certifications, and also, I've built some App Exchange applications, so have some experience as an ISV as well. So I'll be presenting the Salesforce content along with my dear friend here, Julian. So let's look at our plan here. So for today's session, we are going to cover developer tools. We'll see how much we can cover. Maybe some of the content will go to the next sessions. And then we'll also cover data model design. We'll look into front-end application in the next sessions. We have sessions planned for Lightning Web Components, and then also we'll look into application logic using Apex and flows, and then we'll talk about different ALM tools that we have. We'll also look at application packaging and deployments for both for Heroku application, Salesforce application, and we're going to also explore some of our sample gallery apps. Specifically, we will look into eCars app, which was launched recently, and we will try to uncover a lot of the code that's there in that application. Now, I want to spend some time explaining the objectives of this series. So, in this series, our core aim is we want to upskill our Salesforce developers here. We want to teach them the modern development best practices. So, we want to help them with all the latest and greatest tools that we have developed at Salesforce in the last 2 years, and a lot of innovations that we have brought to the developer technologies. We'll also empower Heroku developers. So if you're a Heroku developer, you'll listen from me around different Salesforce capabilities. So you'll learn this art of building applications on Salesforce as well. And now, if you're a new developer and you are just getting started with your application development, welcome. We will take you through this journey of design, build, test, and deploy stages of application on our Salesforce platform. All right. So with that, let's first spend some time around introduction to Salesforce. For a lot of you, it might be a repetition, but for those of you who are very new to Salesforce, I'm sure this will be helpful. So the whole idea of Salesforce platform is we want to help you to take your idea to the application, in a very fast path, or in a very smooth and fast path as possible. So in order to build any application today, an enterprise application, you need infrastructure services. You need to build your own network services. you need to also add application services on top of it. For example, identity and single sign-on, password policies, two-factor authentication. You need to think about your data security. So with all of these, it's a lot of work to build all of these from the ground up, and that's why at Salesforce we have given you all these services out of box so that you focus only on your application idea and you focus on building the application and leave rest of the infrastructure and network and everything to us. Now, we give you not only pro code tools but also low code builder tools. For example, if you want to build a data model on Salesforce, we give you something called a schema builder and clicks, so that you can build your data model with clicks and tools. We have also integrated security and we provide APIs. Our platform is API first platform. That means any functionality that we build, most of the times we have APIs for them. Also, if you want to add business logic, add automation, we have lot of capabilities. For example, we have flows. We provide a language called Apex, which is very similar to Java in syntax. However, it is a cloud-based programming language. And then we also encourage event-driven architecture. We provide platform events, we provide change data capture, and we also have declarative way to add artificial intelligence to your apps. And also, at Salesforce, right, building user interface is very fast because you're not building everything from the ground up. We give you tools, we give you low-code tools so that you can build your detailed layouts. We have app builder from where you can drag and drop components, standard components. We provide lots of standard components. We have app exchange where you can bring in the components, pre-built components from other developers into your UI. And then if you want to customize that, there's a whole framework that we have built, Lightning Web Components, which allow you to create your own components with familiar technologies like JavaScript and HTML. And also, we are following the latest web standards in the Lightning Web Component, so we embrace web components.
And
Now,
that's
with the
one of the things that have me more excited is to be able to see how Salesforce is embracing JavaScript, that one of the main languages to develop applications. And this is why I came in.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julian. Again, Lightning Web Components, I'm so excited that uses JavaScript. And, if you are building a Node application, right, on Heroku, that also uses JavaScript. So looks like JavaScript is one of the skill set, that can be very handy because, you can not only build your web applications, your Lightning Web Components, but also you can build your microservices on Heroku. So over to
Yep.
you, Julian, for the Heroku introduction.
Of course. So the same premise and philosophy of Salesforce, Heroku brings you a lot of different tools. So you don't need to worry about the infrastructure or maintenance of your application. You just need to focus on creating that application, just on the business itself. So Heroku is a platform as a service for building custom applications using one of our supported open source languages. So we officially support languages like JavaScript using the Node.js platform, Ruby, Java, PHP, Python. We also support Go and other sublanguages of Java like Scala and Clojure. So you will be able to use these open source languages that are available out there to create custom experiences for your users. And Heroku pretty much doesn't need Salesforce, and Salesforce doesn't need Heroku. Those can work independently. But when you bring those two platforms together, well, they are part of the same platform pretty much. But when you bring those two technology together, you are going to build great enterprise grade applications. So the main goal and idea behind this series we are starting today is to show you how can you leverage the power of both Heroku and Salesforce to create amazing customer experiences. So let me explain a little bit how Heroku is like architecture in this graph. So we are going to see in the bottom layer we have the app development layer. So we are offering you tools to be able to deploy applications to the cloud, to manage your organization and users. And when I say organization, this is not the Salesforce organization. I mean your organization, how you are going to manage the different users and teams that can interact with the Heroku platform. We give you CI/CD complete solution. So you will be able to do continuous integration and continuous deployment on the Heroku platform. We also focus on security, and you will be able to manage all of the different settings for your application. On top of the application development layer, we have the data services. So our application needs data that can live on Salesforce, and we are going to be able to integrate with data that lives on Salesforce using add-ons like Heroku Connect or doing API calls directly to Salesforce. But we also provide databases that are also open source that you can bring into your application. So we officially support PostgreSQL, Redis, and Apache Kafka that lets you have a real-time enterprise bus for your application. So on top of that, we have the application management layer. We are going to give you tools to monitor your application, making sure you have access to the logs, to do scaling, and we are going to be talking about the scaling the Heroku platform because it is a very interesting concept and is key to develop web applications that are going to have a lot of performance for a great number of users. Heroku is for the hobbyist, like the person that can or want to create like a small application, a start prototyping something, but it's also for big enterprises. So this is from the student that wants to deploy their first application to the cloud to companies that have thousands of applications running on Heroku. So we also have a compliance and trust layer. That means that you will be able to have a pretty much a virtual private cloud for your application that is going to be isolated from the multi-tenant architecture we offer for the standard users. And we also have a shield, what we call Heroku Shield, which is a compliance layer. So we support HIPAA, PCI, and other different certifications, and this is going to be for companies that need way more control over data and data that is going to be way more secure stored in our platform. So Heroku is for all of the spectrum, and it is the same philosophy behind Salesforce to get from an idea to production in very easy steps and getting there super fast.
Yeah, Julian, this is a great intro to Heroku. Now, for Salesforce developers, I think, one of the aspects that I'm looking here is at Salesforce, right? One of the things that we have is, how do we scale, right? So I
Mhm.
saw this concept of scaling in Heroku, right? And that's something at Salesforce, right? We are a multi-tenant architecture. So if you're building any processes, right, we have to make sure that those processes are within those governor limits, so that's
Mhm.
where I think Heroku is really different because what you can do is you can yourself scale, right? You can yourself choose your resources, depending on your business requirement you can scale. So I think that's a really great added benefit, and I think our developers can think about, like, building more microservices on Heroku and exposing them so that they can invoke those services from Salesforce. Now
Yeah,
let's say, yeah.
we can see later in the series how this looks like in a more technical way, like
Mm.
how can we scale in the Roku platform and how easy it is, and what are the different scaling techniques that we offer to our users. So it's pretty powerful, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I see that when we combine both of them, both Salesforce and Heroku, you have like almost a double power than what you,
Mhm.
have just with Salesforce. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. All right, so this episode we are going to focus mainly on developer tools on Salesforce platform. So we're going to talk about developer tools. We're going to show you some of the developer tools. So let's look at it. So this is our Salesforce CLI tools. Now, as a developer, I know that the first tool that you look forward is a CLI. That is a command line tool. And for Salesforce developers, I'll be honest, the command line tool is something very new because we were just used to, the low code capability of Salesforce. Some of you might have used Developer Console, or you might have used just an IDE. So, command line tool is widely adopted everywhere. So we have a trailhead module where you can learn about these command line tools if you're not familiar with that. And one of the prerequisite for working with these command line tools is also a little bit knowledge around some of the Linux commands
Mhm.
specifically. And I think we also have a trailhead module on that, or I'm pretty sure there are a lot of resources on that. So we'll definitely take a look at that. But for now, right, let's focus on OCLIF. So what is OCLIF? OCLIF is an open source framework for building command line applications using Node and JavaScript. So if you look at Heroku CLI and Salesforce CLI, all of the commands that you execute follow a very similar pattern. And that is because both of them are made from this OCLIF. The OCLIF is like a framework to build a command line utility. So let's say your company has a requirement to build your own command line tools. Let's say you have an API and you want to build a command line utility to invoke those API, right? So OCLIF really fits as a framework. Now you can use Node.js to build it, but there are a lot of repetitive tasks that we have sort of abstracted for you so that it becomes really easy to build any command line application. So OCLIF is, think of it as a framework, right? And now we've built Heroku CLI and also Salesforce CLI, with using the same framework, that is OCLIF. That's why you will see that both of the CLI will feel very very similar. Especially the commands. It will look very very similar. It has the same structure and the format. Um, Julian, you want to
So
talk about Heroku CLI a bit, or
sure.
OCLIF?
Before I want to tell a fun fact, when we were creating the Heroku CLI, we came up with this pattern of creating the command line application,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why OCLIF was born. So pretty much, OCLIF is a project that was born internally at Heroku to create the Heroku CLI, and we saw the potential to have this as an open source tool. We release it as an open source tool. Even there is an OCLIF Conf, like a conference around this tool because it is pretty powerful. And it is not only used by Heroku and Salesforce. There are other companies, for example, Twilio, that they build their SDK and the CLI using the same framework. So it is open source. If you need to do something even unrelated with Salesforce and Heroku, you can use this framework to create your CLI applications, and it's going to be very intuitive to do. So as you were mentioning, we have the Heroku and the Salesforce CLI. They are like pretty similar because they follow the same pattern. But I'm going to tell you what you can do from the Heroku CLI. So the Heroku CLI allows you first to manage your user in the Heroku platform. So you will be able to log into the Heroku platform. Pretty much, you are going to type the Heroku login command, and it will open a web browser so you can enter your credentials, and that command line is going to be authenticated. And also allows you to do the application management. What does this mean? In order to deploy an application to Heroku, you will need to create an application, like you create an application space where you are going to deploy. So you can use, for example, the Heroku create command, and also allows you to list the different applications you have available, delete applications, so all of the application management. You can also manage the processes, the configuration, the life cycle of your application. So all of these different settings. If you want to restart an application, if you want to take a look at logs, so everything can be done on the CLI. What else? We have a marketplace which is called the Elements Marketplace, where we have not only the officially supported add-ons that we offer, for example, the PostgreSQL and the Redis add-on I was mentioning you earlier, but others that are created by third parties. Similar to App Exchange, we also have partners that create add-ons that can be used to extend the Heroku experience. So you will be able to manage those add-ons from the CLI as well. You can do all of the different user management, organization management, team managing, and security management, like managing the permissions, who can deploy, who can access certain application. You can also do that from the CLI. And one cool thing, since this is also based on OCLIF, an open source project, you can create your own custom plugins. Let's say you have your own set of tasks that you do with the Heroku platform, or you created a third party add on. you can create your own plugin, publish this plugin to the npm, which is the node.js package registry or the JavaScript package registry, where all of the different libraries and modules for JavaScript lives. You can publish your plugin, and anybody that is using the Heroku CLI can install the plugin and start interacting with it. So it's extensible, it is open source, and we let you manage everything on Heroku.
Awesome. Awesome. And similarly, we have Salesforce CLI here. It pretty much does the same jobs. Like you can authenticate to to a dev hub. I'll talk about what is a dev hub, but you can authenticate basically to any Salesforce org. You can extract the metadata out of it. You can create some data. And later on, you can bundle your application as a package. You can also generate your custom plugins. So you can do a lot of all those lot of common tasks that you do all through the Salesforce CLI. Now, I also want to talk about text editors and IDE. So at Salesforce, right, we prefer using VS Code as our preferred editor because we have been investing a lot building the Salesforce official extension pack for building Salesforce apps. Also, VS Code has a general good other extensions for other various languages, and it is popularly adopted by developers. However, I want to mention this that we leave up to developers to choose IDE of their choice. Like for example, if you are comfortable with, let's say, a Sublime or any other editor, you can use that. But all the APIs and commands are available, to the CLI, so that you can use the command line terminal to execute them. But we provide a UI on top of those commands using the VS Code extension pack that we have built. Also, I want to mention that both OCLIF and VS Code and also Salesforce extension pack, all of these are open source projects. So we are embracing open source work. So you can go to GitHub, find all the code that is behind the Salesforce extension pack or behind this OCLIF framework. Julian, I had a question for you. Is the Heroku
Yep.
CLI also open, or is it like closed and in I'm just
That's
curious.
a good question. I think it's open source.
Okay. I know that
Yep.
Salesforce CLI is not totally open source. I mean, we open source a lot of node bundles, but I know that we are working towards making it completely open source so that anybody can see all the code, all the JavaScript and TypeScript code behind these tools.
Yeah, it is open source. You can go to github.com/Heroku/CLI, and you can find most of the code and commands that lives in there.
Excellent.
So one thing I love about Visual Studio Code,
Hmm.
um, I've been like building software for a while, so I have used mostly editors than IDEs.
Got
I
it.
was not an IDE person.
Right.
Sorry. Only when I was working on Java, you needed like an IDE like Eclipse or NetBeans. I remember
Hmm.
that was I was using back in the days.
Yeah.
But then I switched to working only with Beam or BI, which is a pretty low level but very powerful IDE for the terminal. So you
Yeah.
can use it like as a command line tool. And I was very used to it. Once Visual Studio Code was released, I saw a great opportunity to use it and I fell in love. I mean, it's
Got it.
extensible, easy to use, and me as a Beam user, I was able to enable the Beam plugin and use the same like key bindings that
Yeah.
I already memorized my whole life. So the developer
Got it.
productivity just increased. Second, it has great support for JavaScript and Node.js, mainly because Visual Studio Code, it is also a Node.js application.
Hmm.
So if you didn't know, it is also built with JavaScript. You can build desktop applications as well using JavaScript and Node.js. And it's perfect for web development and the type of development we do. So it's highly recommended, very extensible. There are like a great quantity of uh, extensions that are going to improve your developer experience. One of those, as Mohit mentioned, is the Salesforce extension pack that is maintained by Salesforce. We don't have, like Heroku, we don't have official Visual Studio Code extension, but people in the community have created their own. So if you find Heroku in the marketplace for Visual Studio Code, when you add extensions, you are going to find different options if you want to start like interacting with the Heroku CLI directly from the IDE. So it's very very powerful as well.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to move on to Developer Hub. Now, this is again very specific to Salesforce, but Developer Hub, is pretty much all that you need these days. So you can enable this Developer Hub in your production org, or let's say if you're a partner, you have a partner business org where you can enable these Developer Hubs. So from developer hubs, what you can do is you can create these scratch arcs. So scratch arcs are your developer environments essentially. So you can define the shape of the arc. Like in Salesforce application, you generally have licenses, features, and settings. So you can all define all of them through a configuration file, and I'll walk you through the how that configuration file looks. It's pretty much a JSON. So you define that, and then you create your environments. And then what you can do with DevHubs is you can also create packages, like for example, second generation packages. And I will show you, you can get an org, a developer org for free if you do not know, and you can enable developer hub there, and then you get like three active scratch arcs per day, so you get scratch arcs so that you can like pretty much try all of our features at Salesforce and also start building applications on Salesforce. So we'll take a look at that as we move into our activities section. So okay, so now we move on to activity section, and I want to mention this that we have designed our activities such a way that you actually try them out. You will definitely find a lot of value if you watch the recordings or if you try these activities with us, so that you become really familiar and you do a little bit of hands-on with all the tools and technologies. Okay, so our first activity here is to signing up for our developer edition Salesforce org, and then I'll pass on to Julian, who will show you how to sign up for a Heroku free account. So for developer edition org, there are two ways you can get it. So one way is obviously you go to developer.salesforce.com/signup, like the one that I'm showing here. You provide all these details, and then you register for it. Then you get a developer edition org where you can enable the dev hub. I'll show you how to enable the dev hub. Now the next way, and this is one way to get it, very popular way, you get an edition for free. Now the next way is also through Trailhead. So if you're new to Salesforce, you will find a lot of the resources on trailhead.com. Trailhead.com basically is a free learning site where we make learning fun. So you will see that we gamify this whole concept of learning. So you'll really find materials on any content and badges and materials on anything that you would like to learn about Salesforce or in fact even Heroku. So we keep publishing the content. Now this has an ability to create you a free org where you can enable the dev hub. So for example, let's say I'm taking a badge. When you go to the a module, you will see that at the bottom you have way to create a playground. So for example, I can click on this button called create playground, and this will create you an org. So, and your org will always be here. So whenever you log into Trailhead and you go to your hands-on org, you will see that you will have all these orgs here, and you can just click on the launch and launch that specific org. So you're really also, this is a way to connect all your orgs where you are sort of building application, and also forget about remembering the passwords, etc., because this manages all of your hands-on org for you. Now there's a limit on like connecting 10 orgs, but I think that's a really good limit, and you should definitely find this really helpful. Now with that, right, Julian, I would pass on to you so that you can show our developers how they can sort of sign up for a Heroku account.
Of course. So can you
Yes.
present my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So first step, you are going to go to Heroku.com, and on Heroku.com, you will see this big button in here that says sign up for free. So let's click on it. and pretty much the same. You are going to fill out the information, pick up what type of role are you. You can be either a hobbyist, a professional developer, a student. It's just to give us some information, and that's it. That's how you create a free account on Heroku. There are like one step that we ask for you is to enter a credit card. We are not going to charge you, and you don't need a credit card to create an Heroku account, but you're going to have an extra benefit. Let me tell you what. If you create an account without a credit card, you are going to have only 500 hours a month, which is less than the full month for run a full application. But if you do it with a credit card, you are going to have 1,000 hours a month, which is more than the hours in a month, which is like 750 something. So what does this mean? That you will be able to run a full web application on Heroku and have some extra hours to run, let's say, a worker process. And later in the series, when we are going to get a little bit more technical on Heroku, you are going to see what a worker process is. So it's a good practice if you enter a credit card, but it is not needed, and you can have like a free account to start like building your applications on Heroku. There is going to be only one main difference between a free account and a paid account is that our applications they run on something called a dyno, and we will get into that concept later, so don't worry about it. It sounds cool, but it means where you run the application, pretty much like the virtual computer when you run the application. So for the free account, we put those dynos to sleep after your application is not getting traffic for 30 minutes. So if nobody is going to your application, what we do is like, okay, process, go to sleep. And then when a new request comes in, we wake up the process. That might take a couple of seconds to reply, but if you know when creating a web application, a couple of seconds might be a lot when you want to deliver a great user experience. But for a hobby project, for a learning project, that's pretty good. So you don't need to have a paid account in Heroku to start learning and building applications. But now, when you want to go to the next step, when you are getting users, when you are getting traffic, and your application needs to be always awake and responsive, that's when you will need to start like upgrading to a paid account. And that's how you can create an account here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Julian, for that. Okay, so next we gonna talk about the activity two, which is essentially I'll show you how to clone a sample application. We have eCars application, and the reason why I picked this application is because it has interfaces to Heroku. That means there are parts of the application that use Heroku technology and connect with Salesforce data. So we want to really show that application, and we will uncover that application, meaning we'll get into the parts of the application, we'll get into the nuts and bolts as we progress further in the series. So please join us for all other sessions as well, or cassette recordings. So for this activity, right, I want to make sure that we clone the eCars project from GitHub and deploy the Salesforce components to the Scratch art. So let's get started on that. So before that, I also want to spend some time here and talk about how to like install or where to install some of these tools, right? So first thing you need is Salesforce CLI. So you go to Google and just type Salesforce CLI, and you will see our official website. Always use our official website to download the Salesforce CLI. So you go to developer.salesforce.com/tools/sftxcli. So in this URL, based on your operating system, choose the binary file to download and install. So you'll go through the installation steps. It should be pretty straightforward. Now, if you have troubles installing this CLI, just let us know. I'll share the community URL where you can catch us offline. So you can reach out to us or to our Twitter handles. Just reach out to us in case you are finding very difficulty installing any of these tools. So you need Salesforce CLI for sure. And the next thing you need is VS Code IDE. So again, VS Code is also open source, as I said, and they have a website where you can choose your operating system, and always choose the stable version. If you are working, just choose the stable version. That's very important. So choose the stable build version and install it. So you will need that installed. Other tool you would need is GitHub. Sorry, the Git, right? So you need
Mhm.
Git installed on your local machine, and this is for everything. And if you are very new to the Git, there is a Trailhead module. I'll share the links in our resources section here shortly through our slides. So you should be able to get a really good Trailhead module where it talks about how to use Git. But Git is really essential, for building applications on Heroku or building Salesforce application. If you're a developer, you should really invest some time in exploring Git and learning the fundamentals of Git. So Git is again free and open source. So basically, you choose your operating system version and you can download it. They also give you a free online book called ProGit. I found it really useful, where you can read it online for free if you really want to explore some of the commands. So yeah, so Git is next thing that you need, and then so let's come back to our terminal here to um, see how we can sort of use it. So let's come back to our terminal here. So on the terminal, what I want to mention is once you have installed all of these tools, you should be able to verify. For example, if you type SFDX version, you should see the latest SFDX version that you are running. So on my machine, it is 7.80. That's the latest. But our CLI team actually releases every 2 weeks, so it gets updated pretty frequently. So make sure you are on the latest, and if you are on the oldest version, always run this sfdx update command so that it updates your sfdx CLI to the latest version. Now, if you have a Git installed, you can do Git version as well to make sure you have the Git installed. So as you can see, I have the Git version 2.24.3, right? And I'm using Apple Git here. So yeah, if you have the Git, it'll show up there, right? Now the next thing we want to go is go to our IDE that we are using, that is Visual Studio Code here. So I can open the Visual Studio Code app here for you. So again, it's built, as Julian was saying, right? It's built using JavaScript, and it uses Electron, and Electron uses Node.js essentially. So it's all the same technology. So it's really interesting that same technology that we use for building enterprise scale application, we are also using to build our own developer tools. That's so exciting to me. Um, so one of the things I want to mention is Visual Studio Code is keyboard friendly. Friendly IDE or editor. So you'll see that it has a lot of cool features, and all of them have shortcut commands. And there's a printable keyboard cheat sheet that you can get it from here. That depending on your operating system, they have one for Mac because it was Mac. It automatically figured out that I'm using Mac, but it has one for Windows as well. And really handy. This is really handy. Very valuable resource actually to spend some time and get familiar with it.
I've been using Visual Studio Code for a while, and I just learned about that link.
That's wonderful. That's really
Nice,
wonderful.
nice. Thank
Yeah.
you, thank you, Mo.
No worries. Yeah,
Oh,
they have a lot of resources. Actually, if you go to this help section, right, they have a lot of radio resources. They also have this introductory videos now. So that's also really useful to learn
need,
something. Yeah.
need to be paying more attention to the links. I
Yeah.
always close that window.
That's awesome. Yeah, so again, keyboard friendly. So, like for example, on Mac, I always use Command Shift P to access any of the commands. Like for example, SFDX commands, I just say SFDX, right? And then, other cool feature that it has is this whole extension, right? So you go to this little icon here that I'm showing, that has all these extensions that I've installed, and there are so many extensions. There are thousands of extensions, but for Salesforce, right, always use official extension, that is Salesforce extension pack. So the extension pack has all the things that you need to build a Salesforce application. For example, we have language servers for for coding Apex. We have language servers for Aura components, Visual Force. All of these are our technologies essentially. Also, there's debuggers for debugging the application. Salesforce CLI commands, all of these commands, you will find that there's a handy little convenience through the UI layer to the keyboard, right? So you can find all of them. You don't have to install one by one. If you just type Salesforce extension pack and install, it will install everything for you. Now, there's also community contributed extensions, so feel free to
Mhm.
sort of explore them and see if they really fit your needs, right? And with if you learn Node and JavaScript, it's not hard to actually build one of these extensions. They use the same technology. They use JavaScript and Node. So if you're familiar with them, try building something and sharing with the community. Now, once we have this, right, so the other feature that I want to show you, and this is the file explorer view. This is your GitHub. So other advantages here is it automatically sort of has a connection to the GitHub. So you basically get a commands to execute all your Git commands as well directly right from here. It is tightly integrated. There's an extension actually that sort of allows you to log into the GitHub, and then it links itself, and it has some integrations with Git. So I find that really useful, to have one centric, like have Visual Studio Code and then do all my coding, and then when I want to version control it to the Git, I use this, right? Also debugger. So this is like the debugger utility where you can actually debug applications, right? Also, I have some tools installed, but depending on what you install, you should see a lot of things here. Now, other thing that I want to be sure that you must be aware of is terminal, right? So, for example, you need not actually sort of, have your terminal open. Visual Studio Code provides you a terminal, right? So you can open your terminal, and you can open multiple number of them. As you can see, you can create your own terminals. Like if I click on the other plus icon, it created two terminals. So I can have multiple terminals sort of open here. And by default, right, I've chosen ZSH, right, as my default shell, right? But really, you can change it. If you prefer Bash, I know I'm a Mac user, and I typically follow what Mac sort of gives me out of box. So I'm choosing ZSH shell, right? But you can choose Bash, or if you want to basically bring in other terminals as well, you can configure them pretty easy.
For example, I use Bash,
Oh, you use
so
Bash? Okay, that's
depending
awesome.
of your taste or what you used to.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
they work the same. They
they
have the
work
same
the same.
command.
Yeah,
It's a Unix shell, so both for Mac or Linux,
yeah,
you are going to get the same experience. Even if you are using Windows,
yeah,
on Windows you have the WSL, like the
yeah.
Windows subsystem for Linux, that also provides you with a terminal, or you can
Right.
use the latest Windows terminal, which is pretty good. I'm
Yes.
right now working on a Windows computer, and I also love that development experience that you can get on Windows. So
Yeah,
don't.
WSL2. Yeah, WSL2. I definitely encourage our Salesforce developer audience, if you have Windows and if you use Windows, right? Definitely we support the Salesforce CLI in Windows as well. So if you have opportunity to sort of explore WSL2, I strongly recommend. WSL2 really makes it easier, and we do support our CLI tools in that WSL2 as well for Windows. Okay, so we have all of these, Julian, and we are trying to clone the project, right? Now, before that, I also want to mention one more thing is, like, you can choose your own color themes as well. Now, themes is also a big part of developer experience. So, for example, I like to use this theme that is Salesforce provided. This theme is Salesforce provided essentially that I'm using, but it's called Cody Midnight actually. So there are so many themes out there. So try it out, find your personal preference, and use it. With the themes of your choice. That's a
Yeah,
wonderful
I
feature.
I
Yeah.
use Cody Midnight at work, and I use Dracula at home.
Ah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really nice. So yeah, so feel free to do that. So here we're going to clone our eCars application actually. So I'm going to quickly move on to our browser. So again, we have a lot of sample apps, and this is one of the really we have invested a lot. Developer advocates and evangelists here spend a lot of time actually trying to refresh all of these apps as the Salesforce releases happen. And all of these are open source, meaning you can go tear this application, really look at how we are built, and each of this application also has Trailhead modules. Of course, we're still writing for e-cars, and that's going to come safe harbor, in some some months here. But as you can see, we have, like, for example, easy spaces, right? We have Trailhead modules to help you deploy the application, get used to these sample application, and all of the code, right? Code components and automation that we have done, everything is open source. Like, for example, eCars, right? It's open source, so you can actually get onto the the application code and look at and also you can contribute it. You can contribute to our repos, you can raise issues on this, you can look at our best practices. So most of the applications follow best practices, and if something is not following, feel free to like raise it up and we'll work it out. So yeah, so this is the application essentially. So we're going to pick up e-cars, as I said, because Julian, this application, right? The best thing about this application that I like is its architecture, because it uses, Salesforce for sure, like the standard Salesforce sales and service, but also it uses Heroku to power up a lot of things. Like, for example, there's a Heroku microservice here to create that PDF. We
Mhm.
don't have to write Apex, because generating PDFs is something that you're really pushing the limits of Apex. It might not be the right technology, right? But with Node, right, I know that there are a lot of libraries that can really make this really easier, right? So that's why I
It's a
have.
perfect use case for Node.js.
Yes, so that's why we have, a lot of the parts of the application sort of sitting on Heroku, but it's still, we connect that, we connect that. Also, a lot of, for example, the Heroku web app here, right? So, and it's a progressive web app, right? Like, let's say you have a front end application that needs to be progressive web app, it needs to be really slick, right? Heroku is the platform, because, you can easily build there with Lightning Web Components, right? So this we have built with Lightning Web Components. So it's the same technology that a lot of Salesforce developers use. So you can use the same technology even on the Heroku, right? And then we have this, Apache Kafka and IoT here. Like we are using the Service Cloud for service technician profile, and all the signals. We have this Apache Kafka, which can process all these signals and stream data directly into Salesforce, right? So that's powerful to me, and that's why I think this is a good example application for exploring not only just the Salesforce concepts, but also explore some of the integration aspects of Salesforce, and also how Heroku can fit into your entire application architecture as well.
And we will have a lot of time in the series to go deeper in each of these parts. So we
Yes,
are going to be exploring the Heroku parts. And in upcoming series, I'm going to be showing you how to deploy a progressive web application or a standard web application using Lightning Web Components open source to Heroku. Then we are going to discuss like event-driven platform. We are going to be talking about data. So bear with
exciting.
us. This is,
Yeah,
I know this is a lot of information and this is a huge application. That disclaimer, I was involved in the development of this since January, so it has been like quite a journey building this
this is
app for
awesome.
you all. But super happy to be able to present this to you and explain what's going on, so you have that experience of building modern app applications. And pretty much this is a modern app application that relies on both Salesforce and Heroku.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julian. So let's clone this, right? So as a part of the activity, we want to clone this application and deploy only Salesforce specific parts to it, right? So we want to clone this. So let me clone this application. So you just click on that. If somebody has not like sort of learned how to clone on Git, it's very easy. You just have Git clone and you put the HTTPS URL into it. Now before cloning, I want to make sure that I'm on the right directory. So let's create a directory. So I want to go into my desktop and I want to make a directory there. So again, cd into the desktop. I want to create a directory called Salesforce modern app. Okay, and then I will cd into this directory. Julian, is there resources? Let's say somebody is not familiar with these kind of commands, right? Make directory, cd into the directory. I think we have resources on Trailhead.
There is one resource on Trailhead, like
Command line,
command line basic resources. I
yes,
can find find the name meanwhile you show how to clone.
sure,
And also, we are going to be sharing all of these different resources on a community we are going to be
yeah.
mentioning you later.
Yeah, the Trailblazer community group. Yeah. So okay, so we have this. I've cd'd into it, right? I've cd'd into this specific directory. Now before that, right, we want to make sure also that we have this dev hub enabled. So let me go back and log into an org. So I have it's a developer org again. So I showed you how to create a developer org, right? So I want to log into this developer hub and show you how to sort of enable that developer hub so that you can create scratch orgs. Now, I know that a lot of you might be working in Salesforce enterprise companies that already have a production org. So this again is available on the production org as well. And a lot of you might not still have adopted, sort of scratch org based development because you might have a lot of metadata, and it's a project in itself to decompose that metadata and make sure that it becomes a part of a scratch org based model. Now, if you have not, right, do not worry. You can actually use all of these things with developer org or your developer sandboxes as well. So we have enabled this functionality called source tracking in the developer sandbox. So once you enable that, you should be able to use same commands there as well. So you basically go to dev hub. So you go to dev hub in your production org or in your developer org or in your partner business org, wherever. So you will find the setting called developer hub. You go and enable the developer hub. This allows you to basically create scratch orgs. So that's the whole idea of developer hub. It's a hub org. You can think of it as a parent org from where you generate as many as scratch orgs as you want. But for if you're using a developer edition org, obviously we have some limits on how many scratch orgs you can have at a time. I think it's 3 to 5. I think it's 3. But it should be, if you need more orgs, create more developer edition orgs. There's no limit that way. Also, as I was saying, right, if you're using sandboxes, make sure to change this to enable so that next time you create a sandbox out of your production org. So Julian, this might be very interesting to you. Like I'm talking about sandboxes, right? It might
I
be,
was going to ask you that question
yeah,
because
yeah. What is a
for me,
sandbox? Yeah,
for me, there is like a question between what is a scratch org or the difference between a scratch org and a sandbox and
I know.
how that look like. So if you can explain that to me and the people that are watching us, that would be
Yeah,
great.
yeah. So Julian, so what is a sandbox? Is so till now we didn't have this concept of scratch orgs. Okay, it is only in last 2 years or 3 years, I must say, that we came up with this scratch org concept. Before that, we only had the sandboxes. So anything that you build in sandbox, and then you use something called change set to move that change to production. So think of it as your sandbox is a branch. It's a git. Think of it as a git branch. Okay. So our version control itself is an org. It's not like all of your code is in the sandbox instead of your source control. And that is what the change that we are trying to do now is, instead of having all the code in the org and your org is like the center for everything, right? We are trying to use now version control, right? So if you look at all of our sample gallery application, all the source is in the GitHub. So tomorrow, if I want to create an application, because I have the source, I can easily produce that application, right? Earlier, it was not like that. So it was like you have a production org, and a lot of the developers just use the production org to build their functionality. But we gave the sandboxes, so you can generate the sandbox, build your functionality, test it, and then move your change to the production from the sandbox to the production. Okay, so you can have different sandboxes, like you can have hundreds of sandboxes, and your developers, everyone can have their own sandboxes, build the functionality, ship it up to the production. Or you can have one more sandbox to do your testing, etc., right? It's not source driven, it's mainly org driven. That's why we call it as like org driven, because we are doing everything in the org, testing, development, right? That's your environment to do everything. There's no source control here, right? You're not pulling up the metadata. You're using something called chain set. So that's sandboxes. A lot of developers still use sandboxes because they have piles of metadata already created, a lot of code. So what sandboxes allow you to do, one thing is, let's say I have a production org, right, and I have all the functionality there. Now if I create a sandbox, I'll have the same functionality, and same metadata components that's there in the production. So for example, if you enable settings, if you enable licenses, if you have features, right, you get the same thing in the sandbox. It's just a replica of your production so that you can build your feature and then you can ship that feature to the production. And then when you create a new sandbox out of it, it again has all the features there. So think of your sandboxes as essentially like a Git branch, um, but yeah,
Staging?
staging, yeah, you can treat it as a
Okay.
staging, yeah.
Or what we used to call before pre-production. Or,
Pre-production, yeah, pre-production, you can call it as, and you can have as many as them. You can have one for pre-prod, you can have one for UAT, you can have one for development, right? So you basically
okay.
use these sandboxes to do your functionality. But now we have, it's hard actually to decompose Salesforce metadata, because you might have created like in this application, right? We have how much of metadata? It's pretty small, right? We have these many metadata. Yeah, but like for example, I know that in an enterprise application, you might have like thousands of classes. So if your application like sort of grows big, right? And it's all monolith. That is another aspect. It's all monolith at this point for a lot of our arcs, right? Where it's not decomposed into modules, and that's where like Scratch arcs offer that functionality where, with all this new packaging technology like 2GP unlock packages, you can really build modular application. And that's one of the aim of this series is we also show that aspect of it, like how to build modular scalable applications where building, deploying, everything is source driven and it's so easier. So how to sort of engineer applications on Salesforce in a modern way, right? So that's the aim of this series. Anyways, so now that we have understood, we have this DevHub. The next step here is to authenticate to the DevHub. Okay, so to authenticate to the DevHub, you basically go. So first of all, I want to make sure that I'm on the right folder. I think I'm on the right folder, right? So to authenticate, you basically need to clone. So let's clone the project. I think we
Mhm.
didn't clone the project, right? So let's clone the project. I thought I typed the command. Did I? Did I?
Yeah, I think we didn't clone the project.
Okay, so let's do git clone, and then we go back to our repo, ecars repo, and we just say code, click on this, and git clone, and then we clone the
Mhm.
project. There it is. It's all there in this ecar folder. So I'm gonna say ecars. There it is, and then I'm gonna say code dot so that I open that specific folder right in the GitHub. So as you can see, it has this application code. Now, if I actually open the terminal, right, Command Shift. So how do I open the terminal? New terminal, right? So not terminal, sorry, the command palette. So when I say Command Shift P, my command palette, right? When I say SFDX, now I get all the SFDX commands, right? You see all the SFDX commands that Visual Studio Code provides, and it's basically a convenience over the CLI commands, nothing more than that, but there are certain capabilities again in here. But let's authenticate. So we have this command to authorize a dev hub. That's the first step, is to authorize a dev hub, so that we can create the scratch arc. So you say authorize dev hub, it will open the environment. I need to go to the authentication again. So I just select this and I just put the password. I'll key in the password here. So once I sort of log in, so I'm logged in now. As you can see, successfully logged in, right? So now I've authorized the DevHub successfully. So I've authorized it, right? It ran this CLI command. So essentially it's running the CLI commands so that I didn't have to type this all lengthy command like sfdx force auth web login. So I don't have to type this. So, it did the job for me, right? Now the next step is to create a scratch arc so that we can deploy this source code to our scratch arc. So let's do that. So we go to command palette again, sfdx. There's a neat little convenience command called create a scratch arc, right? Now, before I execute it, right, it's gonna ask me for a definition file. I'm gonna select that. I'm gonna explain it as my scratch arc is sort of generating, right? So let's say I need it only for 7 days, right? So let's explain like what is that scratch definition file, right? So this is the file that it requires to create the scratch arc. Now, in Salesforce environments, right, we have something called as settings, right? So, for example, there might be settings for security. There might be settings to enable features. Like, for example, walkthroughs is one of the features where, you can create a prompt, to explain the different features of the application, right? And there are so many features. There are hundreds of features actually, and there are thousands of settings, in Salesforce environment that you can do. So, so your scratch arc, if it requires certain settings and certain features, right? You actually specify through this JSON file. So you say features, and then you open this JavaScript array again, and then you keep specifying by comma separated, and you specify all the features that you need. Like, for example, somebody needs Service Cloud, somebody needs Sales Cloud, somebody is building application for, let's say, a healthcare, and we call it as Health Cloud, that has all the objects and other functionality for healthcare professionals, right? For healthcare vertical. Similarly, we have one for financial services, right? So we have so many. So we support all these verticals as well, Julian, and also we
Mhm.
support functionalities like Service Cloud, Sales Cloud. There is a lot more. Like, for example, Salesforce Revenue Cloud, which is the new one that got generated. So there's so many things that we support. It's evergreen, and it's you can say that it's continuously growing ecosystem where we are creating vertical centric applications as well, and all of them are packaged so that you can. So for to support that, right, we have this features. So you say features, you say settings, right? And then if you need some sample data, you can turn this flag on, right? In this case, we have our own sample data in our repo which we want to push. That's why it's false. So as you can see, my scratch arc is generated. I will click on this, and you should see uh, the scratch arc, the empty arc. It doesn't have any code. It's pretty clean at this point. It's an environment which has this some settings that got enabled because we specified. So it's a clean arc, right? As you can see, if I look at the applications here, it has only the out of box application that comes with it. But we want to deploy this e-cars application and see in action, right? So I go back to my Visual Studio Code here, and then what we need here is to push this source to the scratch arc, right? So we need to push this source so that we can see. So again, Command Shift P, SFDX, right? And say push. You should see that to push to the arc, right? Now, if you are on terminal, and you like to type it as well, force source push. That's all it takes, push. So now this is going to push all the source code that is there. So which repository, right? Like how do I know, how does it know which path to actually pull all these components, right? So that is why we have this a file called sfdx project.json. So we should have a file called sfdx project.json, and here we define the directories. There's a lot more we can do with this file. We will actually explore throughout the series, but for now it says that our path for the deployment is force app folder. So we have all the Salesforce components here, like for example the objects, the classes, the Lightning Web components that you have built, Julian. All of
Mhm.
these are there in this folder, and we say okay, push this. This is our default, right? And also the API version, that is very important. So 50 is our latest API version, right? So we also are versionable, right? So our scratch arc created in this new winter release arc, and we are pushing with the source API version 50. Generally, you select the new version, but sometimes you have the older version as well, and you can adjust that. So look what happened, Julian. In some time, maybe it's less than a minute, it pushed all our code, all these Lightning Web components, all these declarative features that we have done this app, and it has pushed to this. Now you have to assign the permission set before we can see it, because we are secure by default. That is, we do not allow access to the app, or we do not allow access to anything else. Like, we do not allow access unless you provide the permission. And that's why I think the repo has this permission set. So we have two permission sets. We have one for e-cards. I think we have only one permission set, while the other permission set comes out of box. It's automatically generated. So we have this e-cards permission where we have all of these. We'll explore what is permission, but for now, just let's give the permission. And I think there's a command for that to give the permission.
It's
Here's
on the documentation.
Yeah, here is the interesting stuff, Julian, that This command, we do not have a VS Code like an alternative. There's no VS Code convenience for this command at this point, right? But let's try something new today. Let's try exploring what I call it as task.json. Um, and this is my favorite feature actually in VS Code, that you can actually create something called task.json. Okay. uh, and Julian, you're gonna like this for sure. I'm gonna go to my gist so that I can copy some sample boilerplate here, so that I can show you something that I really want to show all our developers, who not only Salesforce developers, but in general any developer, right? So I'm creating my own build command now, right? Okay, so I'm gonna say assign permission set. That's my command. Okay, and the default will be shell. Now the arguments for this, right? The arguments for this will be my command that I want to execute. So for example, was a command that we were building up here. So we were building for, so we were this one, right? Assign and this permission, right?
Mhm.
So I'm gonna go here and say this, right? So this is my command. I also have n, right? Now n.
Without the SFDX in that case.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, without the SFDX, correct? Because SFDX is my command,
Mhm.
right? So assign, right? Now the next thing is n, and we know, and ecars. Let's hard code for now, but you can actually keep this as a variable. So next time if you want to assign any other permission set, you can actually just put the name in the UI. So I just want to get to the UI at this point. So
I
let's
think
get.
that one is lowercase, Icarus lowercase.
Is it lowercase? Okay, perfectly. Thanks for correcting it. Right, and I want to make sure that this is part of a group called build. So there is a group called build. You can create your own, and I always want to be on the presentation layer, right? So now look what happens. So when I say Command Shift B, right, we should see this command as well. So one sec, give me okay, one sec. So
Where
actually,
should that live? You
yes,
created
yeah.
the file on the SFDX folder.
No, it should live in the vs code folder. So we need
Okay.
a okay. So I just need to make sure that I have the .vs code. One sec. Um, one sec. How do I get out of? I think it's escape. Okay, so now I need just a .vs code folder, right? And then I just need to make sure that I have the task.json inside this. Task.json, move it, right?
Exactly.
Now Command Shift B, right? You see this?
There you go.
There you go. And now what happens? Look what happens. So when I run this, it runs this command in the terminal. So this is exciting to me, So it did the job for me, right? So as a developer, if I have to run some node command, or let's say if I have to run any of the CLI commands that are not there, I can build my own. Again, it's Command Shift B. We call it as build task, right? And you can create your shell script if you want. You can create your node script if you want, and you can also pretty much run any CLI commands using this. So this is a really cool feature. I would definitely request developers to actually explore task.json. It's also well documented in the VS Code guide, right? So yeah, so now Julian, let's see if we have this application. Actually, we'll also need some data. So let's actually run the data command as well. Again, if you want to sort of not have to type this every time, like this is okay because this is like only one time that we are typing, right, Julian? But let's say you have a command that you're frequently typing. It's always good to create a build task like the one that I did. So now I have the data as well, Julian. So we should be seeing the now we should be seeing the application. So I'm refreshing this. So now we should see the application. So let's come back. We should see the e-cars application. There it is, the showroom
Oh.
application, right? And it has all the metadata components. Like for example, I know that vehicles is one of the objects. We have this beautiful inventory page. We will design this page in one of the sessions, right? We have this lovely car configurator page, Julian,
Mhm.
which uses again Lightning Web Components, to sort of build, right? So we have got this application, and this is how easy it is to actually clone any of our sample gallery applications. It's basically you just clone, you follow the instructions on the GitHub, and you should be pretty much, you should have your application sort of up and run. Okay. So now let's get back to our slides, Julian, and wind it up. We are over the time a bit. So we have the helpful references for you. We will share this. We'll share again. It has the GitHub basis. It has the command line interface trailhead module that we were talking about, Julian. It has all the Heroku references on how to get started with Heroku platform. It has the OCLIF documentation link. So there's a lot more here. And also, there's a sample gallery application here. Like, for example, you can, go to this link and find all our sample gallery apps. And this is very important. Join us through this URL, through the Trailblazer community, where we are going to share all these slides and also ask the references, right? So also ask ask for questions. Give us feedback what you would like to see in our sessions, and hopefully you're liking these sessions. So thank you so much again, and catch us for our next session. And keep following Trailhead Live for some amazing content here. Over to you, Julian.
Okay, thank you very much and see you on the next one. Bye bye.
Bye. Take care. Thank you, everyone.